Hello, I'm going to talk to you today about section 9.5 in the book, that is completing the square. And this is another method to solve quadratic equations instead of using the zero product property and factoring. The learning target is to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. Okay, and here we go. Let's say, for example, that we have a quadratic equation that is x squared plus 14x plus 16 equals 0. Now, normally, we would want to keep it just like this, multiply the two outside numbers together, and find the factors of those numbers and factor by grouping and all those fun steps for factoring. If you would like another way to solve this instead of factoring, what we're going to do is complete the square. And the very first step that you need to do is to move the number that is by itself onto the other side of the equal sign. So this 16 is the number by itself. We are going to move it onto the other side. Those cancel out. And we are left with the equation x squared plus 14x equals negative 16. Now I'm going to erase this and create some more space next to my 14x because we are going to be using it later. Leave a little bit of space right there. There is a number we will be putting in there shortly. Okay? The very first thing to complete the square is to look at your middle term, including the sign in front of it. Take that number and divide by 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 14 divided by 2 is 7. Then we are going to take this number and square it. Take 7 squared, and this gives us 49. 7 times 7 is 49. This number right here is what we're going to add to both sides of our equation. It's what we put in the blank. And what we ever do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other. So we're going to add 49 to both sides. This process that we just did is called completing the square. Now, if you want to go through and factor this trinomial right here, this quadratic, and do the exact same process, then you can. But all I am asking you to do is to bring this x down and include this sign that you see right here in front of your second term. This expression up here, factored, becomes x plus 7 squared. This eliminates the entire process of factoring. If you would like to go through and factor to check all the work, then you certainly may do so. I am not requiring you to do, since completing the square eliminates that process. Now, the other side of the equal sign, we must go back up to the negative 16 plus 49. Now, that number, 49 minus 16, is 33. I'm going to rewrite this so it's a little bit cleaner without some arrows. We have x plus 7 squared is equal to 33. Now, in order to solve for this x on the left side, I must get rid of this square. The opposite of squaring is taking the square root, so I'm going to do that to both sides. The square root of x plus 7 squared gives me x plus 7. And the square root of 33, I'm just going to leave this as the plus or minus square root of 33. If you would like to go through and actually do the square root of 33, that number is rounded off to approximate 5.75. The square root of 33 is about 5.75 rounding. So now we have a plus 5.75 and a minus 5.75. I'm going to take each of those plus and minus and rewrite two equations, splitting them up. So the first one is going to be x plus 7 equals 5.75. And the second one is going to be x plus 7 equals negative 5.75. Solving for each of these variables, you subtract 7 on both sides in the red equation to equal negative 1.25. To get the equation on the right, you do the exact same thing by subtracting 7, but this time it's from a negative 5.75. And this time it's equal to negative 12.75. Each of these answers are your solution. So when completing the square, you take your middle term, divide by 2. Whatever number you get from there, you square it. Then that number you add to both sides of the equation. This creates the expression x squared plus 14x plus 49. When factoring this equation, this expression right here in red, this gives you x plus 7 squared. This is factoring. Now you don't need to do that. You can just bring down the plus from up here, and you can bring down that 7 when you divide it by 2. That is that number exactly. Okay. Completing the square is also very useful for finding the vertex of a quadratic. Let's say, for example, we have the equation y equals x squared plus 6x plus 8. This is an equation of a graph, and we could find the vertex by completing the square. Now, you already know how to find the vertex by taking negative b over 2a and setting that equal to x. If you didn't remember how to do that, here's how you can by completing the square. First thing to do is to subtract 8 on both sides. Just like the last problem, you move the number by itself over to the other side. So we are now left with y minus 8 equals x squared plus 6x. Moving the number by itself over to the other side. Now we're going to take our middle term, divide by 2. And this becomes 3. I then square it to get 9, a positive 9. I'm adding that number to the right side and the left side. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other. Now, to eliminate factoring, you bring down the x and you bring down the plus. So we have x plus 3 squared. This is being factored from this expression here with the plus 9. If you factor what's in the box, you will get x plus 3 squared. But since we are completing the square, we do not have to factor. Now over here on the left, we have y minus 8 plus 9, which reduces to y plus 1. To get y equals by itself, just like we do up in the front on the top, you subtract 1 on both sides, and you are left with y equals x plus 3 squared minus 1. Now, vertex formula comes from the general formula that looks like this. Y equals ax minus h squared plus k. If we match everything up that we have in our equation, a positive 3 is equal to negative h, and a negative 1 is equal to k. The vertex is the point hk in our equation. Since my negative h is a positive 3, that means that my positive h is a negative 3. Whatever h you see in your equation, always change the sign. Since my positive k is a negative 1, I'm going to keep that as the exact same sign to get the point negative 1. So my vertex of the equation y equals x squared plus 6x plus 8 is the point negative 3, negative 1. We would not have been able to determine that just by looking at the standard form of the quadratic. So we have to convert it into vertex form, which is right here, and look at our h and our k. The easiest way to do that is by completing the square. This is a fairly new process for most of you. However, if you find this to be much easier, continue to use it. I highly encourage it. If you find it to be confusing and somewhat struggling, then keep practicing on factoring. Do what we've done before. There will be one more method that we will do, and you will have a total of 3 where you know how to solve the quadratics. Thank you very much.